One day, without warning, she left the house telling her parents she was staying at a friend's. A sudden announcement, and since then, she has never been seen again. Her parents never could have fathomed that moment would be the last time they'd ever hear her voice a final exchange before the nightmare began.
Nothing to suggest why she would disappear. She just didn't come home one night, and I didn't find her car until the Monday in the car park, as you just said.
She hadn't taken any money out of the bank, or she hadn't taken a...
Have you ever wondered how someone can disappear overnight, leaving behind puzzling clues? Today we find ourselves in Richmond, North Yorkshire. North Yorkshire is a place of breathtaking natural beauty, vast landscapes and friendly locals. And for one of its residents, Jenny Nicholl, life revolved around friendship, family, and joy. Jenny Nicholl was 19 years old, a young woman known for her passion for music and the great outdoors. Jenny led a life that many would envy, filled with the rhythm of rock music and the thrill of camping under the stars. She was a member of a local rock band, always strumming her guitar with a smile, and worked at a co-op store in town. At 5'6", with long flowing blonde hair and bright blue eyes, she had an energy that could light up any room she entered. Jenny was not just a girl with a dream, but someone who made that dream a reality every day. She lived with her parents, Anne, a former cleaner, and Brian, a retired Army lieutenant, on Bolton Avenue. On June 30th, 2005, she informed her family that she would be spending the night camping with friends. It was nothing unusual. Jenny often went on camping trips alone, or with friends seeking the serenity of nature. She packed her gear, left her house, and was never seen again. No one thought twice. It was the type of thing Jenny did often, and no one suspected that this time would be different. But when the days passed and Jenny still hadn't returned, her family grew anxious. She didn't show up at work. Her friends tried calling, but there was no answer. Something felt wrong, and the unease settled like a cold weight in the pit of their stomachs. This wasn't like her. Jenny had always been responsible, always kept in touch, but now, silence. 4 days later, a chilling discovery sent ripples through the community. Jenny's car was found abandoned in the parking lot of a local pub. The keys were still inside the engine cold. The sight of her car empty alone sent a wave of panic through her family. Jenny had vanished without a trace. No one knew where she had gone. No one had seen her since she left the house. As the search began, a wave of dread swept over Richmond. Posters of Jenny's face with her bright smile and clear eyes were posted everywhere. The community banded together, calling on anyone with information to come forward. Local authorities launched a full-scale investigation, knocking on doors, canvassing the area, asking questions. But despite their best efforts, there was no sign of Jenny. No one had seen anything. No one had heard anything. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. Then another piece of the puzzle fell into place, an eerie clue that would send shivers down anyone's spine. In a forested area near Richmond called Sandbeck Plantation, personal items belonging to Jenny were discovered. Her cosmetics, her sleeping clothes buried beneath the leaves. The items were scattered haphazardly, as though someone had discarded them in a hurry. It was a discovery that brought more questions than answers. Why had Jenny's things been left behind? And where was she? The items found in the woods raised the stakes. The sense of mystery deepened, and the investigation grew more urgent. What happened in the moments leading up to her disappearance? Had she been attacked? Had she left on her own accord? Or was there someone or something else involved? As the evidence mounted, the chilling feeling that something far darker had occurred began to take hold. Despite the growing unease, no further clues emerged. The community waited, hearts heavy with the unknown. Jenny's family couldn't understand it. How could their daughter, a young woman with so much ahead of her, simply vanish without a trace? The thought that someone might have taken her, or worse, was too much to bear. Days turned into weeks, and the silence only grew more oppressive. The search continued, but as time passed, hope began to dwindle. The case went cold. No one knew where Jenny was or what had happened to her. Her family was left with only the haunting question, why? Every piece of evidence seemed to lead nowhere. The abandoned car, the discarded personal items, nothing made sense. What was the connection between Jenny's disappearance and these strange clues? Was someone hiding something? Was there a dark truth buried beneath the surface that no one was ready to face? The mystery of Jenny Nicholl's disappearance remains unsolved, her fate still a chilling enigma. As the investigation into Jenny Nicholl's disappearance unfolded, a chilling discovery emerged that would alter the course of the case. The police uncovered a troubling connection between Jenny and a man named David Hodgson, a much older individual who had a significant presence in her life. David, born in 1959, was 46 years old at the time of Jenny's disappearance. He was married with 2 daughters, both of whom were Jenny's schoolmates. The relationship between Jenny and David had started innocently, but as the investigation revealed, David had been in Jenny's life much longer than anyone had realized. He had known her since she was a young teenager, and over time he had developed a closer bond with her. Initially, David denied any romantic involvement with Jenny. He claimed that their relationship had always been strictly platonic, but as the investigation deepened, his story began to unravel. Under the pressure of further questioning, David eventually admitted to having had physical contact with Jenny. He insisted, however, that their interactions only began after Jenny turned 16. But his statement did little to clear the growing cloud of suspicion surrounding him. The detectives couldn't ignore the disturbing nature of the relationship, and more questions began to arise. The investigation took a darker turn when forensic evidence uncovered something unsettling. DNA found in 2 secluded areas near Richmond suggested that Jenny and David had shared intimate moments in those hidden places. These locations, previously thought to be peaceful spots for nature walks, now carried a sinister connotation. The discovery of Jenny's DNA in these secluded areas added a disturbing layer to the investigation, one that pointed to a more complex and potentially dangerous connection between the two. With the growing evidence, the investigation into Jenny's disappearance shifted focus. The police couldn't help but question the role David may have played in her disappearance. Could he have led her into these hidden locations? What had really happened in those woods? Was it simply a tragic accident, or was there something darker at play? As the investigation progressed, the police worked tirelessly to piece together the timeline of events. What had seemed like a random disappearance was now beginning to look more like a carefully orchestrated series of events. The evidence suggested that Jenny had been in these areas willingly. But why was David involved in her disappearance? Or was he merely a part of a larger, more complex story that had yet to be fully revealed? With each passing day, the case grew more perplexing. The police were no closer to finding the answers, and Jenny's family continued to search for closure. As the mystery deepened, one thing was certain: Jenny's disappearance was far from ordinary, and the truth about what had happened to her remained locked away in the shadows. It was the 3rd of July when Jenny's absence began to stir the first real signs of alarm. Her mother, Anne, had tried to reach her all day, but there was nothing. No phone call, no text message, no word from her daughter. Jenny had always been reliable, always checking in, and her lack of communication that day felt wrong, unnervingly so. Jenny was supposed to show up for her shift at the co-op store, but when the hours passed and there was still no sign of her, Anne's worry deepened. It wasn't like Jenny to just vanish without a trace. Something felt off, and Anne's unease grew with each passing hour. Her mind raced. Could something have happened to Jenny? Had she encountered trouble? The thought clawed at her, refusing to be shaken. Anne reached out to friends and family, hoping for any sign, any word from Jenny. But nothing came. The silence was deafening. The helplessness was overwhelming. Jenny's absence was more than just an inconvenient no-show at work. It was a disappearance that didn't make sense. Anne knew her daughter well. Jenny was not the type to just disappear. There was always a reason, always a message, and this time there was nothing. On the morning of July 4th, after another sleepless night, Anne couldn't wait any longer. The fear had turned into something darker, something she couldn't ignore. She picked up the phone and called the police, reporting Jenny as missing. She didn't know what else to do. There was no sign of Jenny, no clue as to where she had gone, and the unease in her chest had hardened into a chilling certainty. Something had happened to Jenny, and Anne was desperate to find out what. As the police began their investigation, Anne didn't sit idly by. Her heart raced with every passing moment, but she knew she couldn't give up. She knew her daughter was out there somewhere, and she would do whatever it took to find her. She joined the search, reaching out to neighbors, posting flyers, and spreading the word about her missing daughter. Richmond, a town that had once felt safe and peaceful, now felt eerily empty, silent in the face of an unsettling unknown. The town's residents rallied together, but despite their efforts, the search turned up nothing. No one had seen Jenny. No one had heard anything. Her absence was an enigma, a dark cloud hanging over the community. The sense of helplessness began to set in as the hours stretched into days. Every phone call Anne received, every knock on the door, brought only more questions and more confusion. The search seemed endless, the mystery deepening with each passing day. The police scoured the area, retracing Jenny's steps, hoping to find some kind of clue that would lead them to her. But there was nothing. No one could explain where she had gone, and there was no evidence to suggest foul play. Yet the growing suspicion that something terrible had happened began to grip the investigation. With each passing day, the fear grew, and Anne's desperation became more palpable. What had happened to Jenny? Where had she gone? As the hours turned into days, the case began to feel like an insurmountable mystery, a puzzle with no clear answers. The search for Jenny Nicholl was just beginning, but with every day that passed, the possibility that Jenny was still out there somewhere slowly faded. The search for Jenny Nicholl took a chilling turn on July 6th when her mother Anne made a haunting discovery. While canvassing the area in yet another desperate attempt to find her daughter, Anne stumbled upon Jenny's car, a Rover 214i left abandoned in the parking lot of a local pub. The sight of the car sitting eerily still in the dimming light of the evening struck Anne like a punch to the gut. It was Jenny's vehicle, but Jenny was nowhere to be found. The discovery was unsettling, to say the least. Jenny had always been responsible, always ensured she was in touch with her family, especially when it came to her car. For her to leave it behind with no explanation and no sign of her whereabouts sent a wave of dread rippling through the investigation. This wasn't just another missing person case. Something was horribly wrong. Anne's heart sank as the terrifying reality began to set in. Her daughter had disappeared without a trace, and now even her car was a cryptic clue pointing to something far darker. The police were quick to respond. They arrived at the scene, investigating the car for any clues that might offer a lead. But despite their efforts, there was nothing, no sign of struggle, no indication of what had happened to Jenny. As the search spread beyond Richmond, the community rallied together, but the growing sense of unease was undeniable. There was no trace of Jenny anywhere. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The police began to fear that they were searching for a needle in a haystack with nothing but empty hope to guide them. With every passing hour, the feeling of impending dread only intensified. Jenny had been gone for days, and yet there was still no explanation for her disappearance. The only thing the police had was a car left behind in a pub parking lot, a symbol of the terrifying unknown. The local police, now deeply concerned, expanded their efforts, bringing in 20 officers to focus solely on the case. The small town of Richmond, which had once felt safe and familiar, was now the backdrop of a haunting mystery. The atmosphere in the town had shifted. The familiar places where Jenny had once spent time now seemed empty, as if haunted by her absence. Investigators questioned regulars, spoke to bartenders, and tried to piece together Jenny's movements in the days leading up to her disappearance. But despite their efforts, there was no new information, no fresh leads. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Jenny's family, meanwhile, waited in agony, caught between the raw hope that she might return and the gnawing fear that something terrible had happened to her. Every moment without news was a crushing weight on their hearts, but they had no choice but to hold on to the hope that somehow, somewhere, their daughter was still out there. The case had now moved beyond the initial search and into the realm of the unknown as the police struggled to connect the scattered pieces of evidence. What had happened to Jenny? Where had she gone, and who was responsible for her disappearance? The deeper they dug, the more chilling the possibilities became. The case of Jenny Nicholl's disappearance took a chilling twist on July 14th when a series of text messages were sent from her phone. The messages claimed that Jenny was safe and living in Scotland with her boyfriend, and that she had decided not to return. At first, these messages brought a brief moment of relief to her family, who had been tortured by the silence of the days prior. It seemed like a resolution, finally some explanation, some answer. But as Anne read the messages, a sinking feeling began to creep in. While the content of the messages appeared to reassure her, there was something deeply unsettling about the details. The way the messages were worded didn't sound like Jenny. They didn't carry her usual tone or style. The messages were too clinical, too controlled, as if they had been written by someone else, someone who knew just enough to mimic the language she might use, but not enough to capture her true essence. It wasn't long before the police caught wind of the strange messages. They were immediately suspicious. The messages, though they seemed to offer closure, didn't align with the Jenny they knew. The phrasing was off, the tone was wrong, and the message itself seemed too convenient, too calculated. The investigators quickly determined that the texts couldn't have come from Jenny. Her style, her personality, her spontaneity were absent. The questions surrounding the false messages remained unanswered. Why had they been sent? Who was behind them? And most disturbingly of all, what had happened to Jenny? For weeks, the search had seemed like a wild goose chase, the police and volunteers combing through the vast woods with no sign of Jenny, no clue to guide them. But that day, amid the towering trees and thick underbrush, a glimmer of hope finally appeared. It was during a routine sweep of the area when investigators stumbled upon an unsettling yet pivotal find: a teddy bear and a portable music player. These items, once ordinary possessions belonging to a young girl with a love for music, now held far more significance. They were Jenny's. There was no doubt about it. The teddy bear, worn and faded from years of use, and the music player still carrying traces of Jenny's presence, were the first concrete pieces of evidence confirming that Jenny had been in this area after her disappearance.
Is that her teddy bear?
This is the teddy that her dad bought her on Christmas. And that went from the home maybe 2.5 months before she left.
So this is a replica, is it?
This is a replica, yeah.
The discovery hit like a shockwave, each item now representing a small but significant step toward unraveling the mystery. These items, once simple possessions, were now part of the eerie puzzle that had plagued the investigation for weeks. Jenny had been here in this very spot after she had gone missing. But why? And what had happened to her? The discovery of these objects raised more questions than answers, but it was clear that they held the key to understanding what had transpired in the days following her disappearance. For the first time since Jenny's vanishing, the case seemed to move forward. The police were no longer working in the dark. They now had physical evidence linking Jenny to the area, something they could investigate, something to build on. The teddy bear and music player weren't just belongings. They were the first real confirmation that Jenny had been alive and present in the forest, at least for a time. But where had she gone after that? And what had happened to her in the woods? The eerie quiet of the woods seemed to hold secrets too dark to reveal, and with every step deeper into the investigation, the unsettling feeling that Jenny's fate was tied to something far more sinister began to grow. After months of investigation, a breakthrough finally came in the case of Jenny Nicholl's disappearance. David Hodgson, the man who had once been close to Jenny, was arrested on suspicion of murder. The investigation had grown colder with each passing day, but now with David in custody, the chilling questions that had plagued the case for so long seemed closer to being answered. David, a man with a complex and unsettling relationship with Jenny, was now at the center of the investigation. As the police dug deeper into his life and his history with Jenny, disturbing details began to emerge. David had shown signs of manipulation and jealousy towards Jenny, particularly when she had started to grow closer to his brother Robert. Witnesses who knew David and Jenny reported seeing his temper flare as he grew increasingly angry and resentful. It was when Jenny and Robert became closer, their bond growing stronger, that David's jealousy reached a breaking point. The tension between them escalated, and those who witnessed their interactions began to feel an unease that they couldn't shake. David's volatile emotions, especially his resentment towards Jenny's relationship with Robert, had become impossible to ignore. The arrest of David Hodgson sent shockwaves through the investigation. For months, his role in Jenny's disappearance had been clouded by suspicion, but now, with new evidence pointing toward his involvement, the case had taken a dark and terrifying turn. The police had gathered enough evidence to warrant his arrest, but the mystery of what had truly happened to Jenny remained unsolved. Was David responsible for her disappearance? Or was he merely a part of a much larger, more complicated story? The arrest raised more questions than it answered. What had driven David to this point? What had happened in the moments leading up to Jenny's disappearance? And how deep did his jealousy and manipulation run? The police were now facing the grim task of uncovering the full extent of David Hodgson's involvement, and whether or not he was the key to unraveling the chilling mystery that had haunted Richmond for so long. The investigation into Jenny Nicholl's disappearance took a crucial step forward on March 27, 2006, when forensic experts provided irrefutable evidence that would shatter the carefully constructed facade of innocence. Forensic linguists specializing in the analysis of text messages began their deep dive into the suspicious messages sent from Jenny's phone after her disappearance. The experts meticulously compared the messages that had been sent in the days following Jenny's vanishing, analyzing the structure, tone, and style of the writing. The later messages bore striking similarities to the way David Hodgson wrote. The phrasing, the structure, the choices of words, they matched almost exactly with his known style of writing. This discovery was nothing short of chilling. It became glaringly clear that these messages were not written by Jenny at all. The conclusion was undeniable. David, the very man at the center of the investigation, had likely been the one sending those false messages. The police had long suspected that the texts were part of a calculated attempt to mislead and misdirect the investigation, and now, with the forensic analysis backing up their suspicions, it seemed the puzzle was finally falling into place. The discovery of this forensic evidence further solidified the growing belief that David was involved in Jenny's disappearance, and that he had been trying to cover his tracks by sending these fabricated messages. The manipulation, the deceit, the careful attempts to erase his role in Jenny's fate, all of it was now laid bare for the investigation team to see. The investigation into Jenny Nicholl's disappearance took a dramatic and horrifying turn on November 3, 2006, when the police made an official announcement that would send shockwaves through the community. What had once been a missing person case was now officially a murder investigation. The shift marked a critical turning point in the case, a recognition that something far more sinister had been at play all along. The decision to reclassify the case from missing persons to murder was not made lightly. After months of painstaking investigation, the police had gathered enough evidence to suggest that Jenny's disappearance was no accident. The growing evidence pointed to foul play, and the chilling reality that Jenny's life had been tragically taken became all too clear. The police, once focused on finding a missing young woman, were now pursuing the much darker possibility of solving a murder. After months of relentless investigation, on May 7, 2007, David Hodgson, the man at the center of the case, was formally charged with the murder of Jenny Nicholl. The charges followed a thorough examination of the evidence, which had become increasingly damning as the months went by. The forensic evidence, including the false text messages and David's suspicious behavior, had painted a clear picture of his involvement in Jenny's death. His jealousy, manipulation, and the violent undercurrents of his relationship with Jenny had finally culminated in a devastating act of violence. David's arrest and the charges against him marked a grim milestone in the investigation. The truth about what had happened to Jenny was now unfolding piece by painful piece. But even as the case moved forward, the questions continued to haunt those who had been involved. What had driven David to take Jenny's life, and what had truly happened in the moments leading up to her death? The case of Jenny Nicholl took a pivotal turn in February 2008 when David Hodgson stood trial for the murder of the young woman whose life he had so brutally taken. The courtroom was tense as the details of Jenny's tragic end were slowly brought to light. David, once a trusted figure in Jenny's life, was now facing the consequences of his actions. The evidence was overwhelming, and after months of legal proceedings, the jury reached a verdict. David Hodgson was found guilty of the murder of Jenny Nicholl. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum sentence of 18 years before he could be considered for parole. The verdict brought a sense of closure to the case, but it could never undo the pain and loss that Jenny's family had endured. While justice had been served in the eyes of the law, the truth of what had happened to Jenny and the mystery of her final resting place remained an unsolved, haunting question. Despite his conviction, Jenny's body had never been found. For her family, the anguish of not knowing where she lay, where her final moments had unfolded, was a pain that no conviction could heal. In the wake of Jenny's case and other similar tragedies, a significant legal reform was introduced in the United Kingdom. Known as Helen's Law, this piece of legislation sought to address the ongoing issue of convicted murderers, withholding information about the location of their victims' bodies. The law was named after Helen McCourt, whose murderer also refused to reveal her resting place, much like David Hodgson had done with Jenny. Helen's Law ensured that those convicted of murder would not be eligible for parole unless they disclosed the whereabouts of their victims' remains. The law was a direct response to the pain and frustration felt by families like Jenny's, who were forced to endure the agony of not knowing where their loved ones were buried. For Jenny's family, the passing of this law was a bittersweet victory. It couldn't bring their daughter back, nor could it provide the answers they so desperately needed. But it was a step toward ensuring that no other family would have to suffer the same uncertainty and anguish. It was a legacy born of heartbreak, one that would help ensure that murderers like David Hodgson could not hide their crimes from the families they had destroyed. In the years following the trial, Jenny's parents spoke out about the profound pain they endured. The fact that David Hodgson, even in prison, refused to reveal where Jenny's body was hidden only intensified their anguish. They were trapped in a limbo with no way of laying their daughter to rest. The desire for closure, the need to grieve properly, was denied to them. And yet, in the face of this heartbreaking void, they made a powerful decision. They chose to refuse David's request to disclose the location of Jenny's remains. In doing so, they denied him any power over their sorrow. They would not allow him to control the one final thing they had left, the ability to mourn their daughter in peace. The choice was an act of defiance, a way of taking back some semblance of control in a situation that had stripped them of everything else. Jenny's case also highlighted a critical flaw in the legal system, one that affected not just her family, but the families of countless other victims. The trauma of reliving their worst moments in the courtroom, of being forced to testify in a system that seemed to focus more on procedure than on the emotional well-being of the victims' families, was a constant source of suffering. Jenny's family, like others before them, was subjected to this agonizing process. It was an emotional toll that no one should have to endure, yet it was an unfortunate reality for those seeking justice. As the years passed, Jenny's family became advocates for change in the legal system, speaking out about the need for better protection for families of victims. The case of Jenny Nicholl is a heartbreaking example of how manipulation and jealousy can lead to tragedy. The brutal murder, the false messages sent to deceive her family, and the killer's refusal to reveal the location of Jenny's final resting place left a lasting impact on everyone involved. The emotional toll of these actions continues to reverberate through the lives of Jenny's family and the community. Although David Hodgson was convicted of the murder, the mystery surrounding Jenny's burial place remains unresolved. The questions still linger, casting a shadow over the sense of justice that was supposed to bring closure. For Jenny's family, the unanswered question of where their daughter lies buried continues to haunt them, a constant reminder that even with the conviction of the man responsible, they are still denied the peace of knowing where Jenny is. The case serves as a tragic reminder of the lengths to which manipulation and control can go, and how the consequences of such actions can ripple outwards, leaving destruction in their wake. The pursuit of justice for Jenny is not over. Her family, though they have fought tirelessly for answers, still grapple with the pain of not knowing the final truth. And until that truth is revealed, the case of Jenny Nicholl remains a haunting, unresolved mystery.